Okay, yeah, so you got some time on.
Now 7-year-old.
This is my wife, by the way. I don't know if you've met her. Christina.
Nice to meet you.
This is
I'm Steve.
Dr. Steve Tuell, one of my professors.
I hear all kinds of things.
Oh, well, bless your heart.
All kind.
All
Just so you
kinds.
know.
Well, of course. I would expect nothing else.
Right, yeah. But, and outside of professionally, are we both allowed to be excited about the Pirates? Where are we at? I like the moves they're making.
I very much like the moves they're
I have to go
making.
get a
Right,
child.
yeah. I mean, a third baseman would be nice, but if we get there, we get there, right?
We've got a couple of reliable bats.
Right, yep, yeah, which they haven't had in a while.
I mean, that's been the huge hole.
Right.
We've had, one of the best pitching rotations in baseball.
Right.
But that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
If you can't actually score a run sometimes.
Right, I mean, I've looked at the stats of, Paul Skeens' starts, and if we had given him 3 runs of support in each of the starts, he'd only lost 1 game in his career.
Yeah.
No wonder I was.
All we need is 3 runs?
Well,
Come on!
it's extraordinary that, he was recognized
Yeah.
by baseball, got the Cy Young, but that was despite nearly having a losing record.
Right, the fact that he had to be historically great just to get him to pay attention is like, come on, guys. Give him something, somebody.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, I am very hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, the Dodgers continue to make it tough.
Well, yeah, the Dodgers not only have a huge chunk of change, they are very well managed.
Yeah.
Their ownership and
They draft well.
Oh yeah.
And they still have one of the top farm systems in the league while still having an all-star at 1 through 9, right? What are you supposed to do with that?
It's not fair, but it makes sense.
Right,
But the Dodgers are historically good.
Yep.
I was really rooting for the Blue Jays.
Me too.
Yeah.
I was sitting at I don't know, I guess it was a Halloween party. I was sitting at a Halloween party with friends and we're watching the game, and as it keeps going to extras further and further, I'm going, they're not going to get out of this thing with a win. They just don't have depth. You've got a team like the Dodgers who have infinite depth. It just isn't going to happen,
But the fact that they made such a good run.
It wasn't
I
just
was
steam, huh?
No. Yeah, me too.
It was leather smoke.
No, I had
I'll have to tell my mom I saw you today. I'm running over to their house right now. So.
Is he the one that held? My hands are wet from the winter.
Yes, he did hold. That's why I made Silas.
You did make
Silas?
Silas?
Yes. I was thinking, my goodness.
I know. Yep. He was literally born in between my first and second semester at yeah, so it's like right off the bat, as we're dealing with something. And I was so appreciative of each and every one of the professors who was just like, no, bring him in, not a problem. Because we didn't have any other options. I mean, she works full time. I work. It's like, where am I supposed to take him? I can't afford any of that.
But there's no defense. I was pregnant when he decided to go back to school. So
might not have been the wisest decision, right? But
when I went back to school for my PhD, Wendy was sick all the time, and she would smell something that I couldn't smell in the apartment. And I kept thinking, oh man, she's getting sick, I'm taking her away from people. It turned out she was pregnant. So Sean and Anthony were both born in the middle of my doctoral.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. Oh my. Well, I don't want to hold you up from teaching, but
nice to meet you.
Hopefully we'll have you back soon. And I mean, I think it'd be fun to have you come and talk about your book. So we would love to hear that. So.
Well, thanks, Ben.
See you later.
Lord bless you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
Inexpensive.
How was your life?
In case you have to be.
I was fine. I was at a grandson's birthday party.
Oh, wonderful!
This week, so he's now a 7-year-old. And
Oh, my
very
goodness.
inquisitive, curious, and frisky.
21.
he and his older sister would like to
So he
have
was fine. And
battles in the
like I said,
living room.
and
And
I-
he holds his own against the sister who has a much longer reach because she's 5 years older.
And I forget where they started.
And he's now
Place
big enough and sturdy enough that she can take a whack at him and not be in danger of crippling him. So they have a good time.
Oh, outstanding.
But he was having fun because this was in Northern Virginia near DC. And I was helping my wife shovel out part of the parking spaces. So using a spade to chop up the big chunks of icy snow.
Oh, yeah.
And so Ryan was grabbing a chunk and heaving it off to the side. And he had a great time doing that.
Well, my memories of when we were in the Richmond area
Okay.
were that just about every winter, it seemed, we'd get an ice storm. Not much snow, but we would get at least one ice storm, and the trees would be covered with
Yep.
this glass,
Yep.
and the streets were
Slick as all get
absolutely
out.
impassable.
And if enough ice builds up on the branches, they start
Yeah,
breaking the power lines.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That was always scary. And one of the great things about this move, was in the Richmond, well, and I'm sure it's the same way in the Alexandria area, since they don't get as much snow or ice, the road crews aren't prepared, and people don't know how to drive
Yeah.
on slippery surfaces.
Pittsburgh streets
And
are
so-
terrible.
And the other
Yeah, they were
contributing
experienced
factor
one lady on
was
the
that
side.
with the quantity of snow they got and the persistent cold, the major intersections were plowed, but all
Yes,
the
she died.
effluvium of the plow blades
They
were
don't know.
blocking the
They're trying to
turning
ask
lanes.
for-
Yes.
So people were used to going
Yeah,
into
and they
that
were
extra
asking for
turning lane
because
and
they
making a
had
nice
seen
wide
what
turn. No, you
happened.
gotta go to the intersection, take a sharp turn
Oh,
and hope that there's enough width facing you to be able to get through.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was telling someone earlier, it took me about 10 minutes to get out of our driveway because I was navigating around my son's cars, which were parked in the driveway, and there was no forgiveness. So on either side of the driveway, huge piles from the snow plows. And in fact, my son on Friday morning was late for work because he got just a little bit over to one side, and that was enough. He was stuck. We had to call a truck.
Yeah.
Hey,
How are ya?
I could not possibly be.
I'm hanging in there. Good. Wish I could say that I could not possibly be any better, but
Oh,
There was a storm and the ship lost its
I am
bearings.
ridiculously blessed.
Broke his leg,
Oh,
and he
no.
was down for like 45,
Yeah.
about 45 minutes. And it
I'm
was cold.
ridiculously tired.
And he
Oh,
was
I'm
pressurized there,
sure, love
Yeah,
you.
no, it's
and he survived.
Just
without
normal.
any consequences.
young
None.
children. This is what it's.
What did he get
This
into?
was like now.
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
To come up from
Well,
300 feet
I'm-
takes hours.
Yeah.
Bless your heart for being here, my
Oh.
goodness.
They brought him in
This is my break.
and they got into the chamber.
Oh, okay, they had a chamber.
And
huh?
then he
Let's
stayed in the
see.
chamber for 2
Speaking
weeks
of which,
after-
oh,
he couldn't even go
we
to
should
a
be
hospital.
starting soon, shouldn't we?
I think
But
we're
he
good.
survived, totally. There's a new-
Are we online?
Yes. And is Bob there? Somebody else is watching and listening. Pastor is recording this message as well.
Already got it.
And eventually it should be available on YouTube if you have relatives or friends who wanted to hear what you had to say
Well,
and see
bless
what
your
you
heart.
had to show.
And I'll look back and find out what I said. Oh, no!
That is the funny thing about recordings.
Yeah. All the little oopsies show up.
Go back and watch a.
Or
sermon
you can
and
go
like-
back and listen to see what people were asking questions about to help you refine your
Oh,
next
yeah.
book
Oh,
on
yeah.
Proverbs.
Absolutely.
Which reminds me, I had a thought early on in this session, and I'll just relate to you because the class hasn't really started quite yet. We're still signing in. Proverbs that are attributed to Solomon in writing does not necessarily mean they were written by Solomon or even spoken by Solomon. And that came to me forcefully when I was reading. I think it was something earlier on in this book that it was just pure hero worship of Solomon.
Yeah.
What, and hundreds of years afterwards, and we know what happens from at least my experience in hero worship.
Oh, yeah.
All the faults are not seen, and all the acts are magnified, and then anything, it has to do with wisdom. Oh, it must have been by Solomon because he was the greatest.
Oh,
his
yeah.
wisdom was greater than the sands of the seacoast, and
Well, that's
and
what.
that metaphor just solidified for me skepticism about attributing to Solomon without at least
Oh, yeah.
a little other evidence.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, maybe I was gonna buy something.
Okay.
Anyway, there is a sign-in sheet.
We're good.
Okay,
We're all
Jim
set.
Sutherland is not with us today, maybe because of the
Thank
weather.
goodness. I don't want him out driving when it's this cold.
Oh,
Precious
mercy.
cargo.
He's 91, 92.
Yeah.
He's 92. I think he might be 93.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think 93, but.
Oh, my goodness.
They said how old he was in that article, but I don't remember.
Well, it's been such a blessing having him here.
Yeah,
He had the
yeah.
first home computer,
Yeah.
which is sort of interesting. He got it, put it together.
Good morning.
There's our friend Bob.
Top of the morning to you folks.
I know.
Okay.
And I think his computer is in a museum out in California.
Yeah, it is.
Yes.
He shipped it out.
Oh, my.
The,
It's kind of interesting.
And Ruth was very involved with that, wasn't she?
she used it.
Yeah.
The problem is it used too much power.
I can imagine. It took up the whole room.
And so they didn't use it that often.
A point of personal family pride is that when the library at what is now Union Presbyterian Seminary in Richmond, it was just Union Theological Seminary when I was there all these many years ago, when they went online with their catalog, their card catalogs, the cabinets, which were just beautiful wooden cabinets, are now in the Smithsonian. And in those drawers, there are cards that have my sweetie Wendy Lou's handwriting on them.
Oh, love it.
From when she was working at the library there at Union. So my wife is in the Smithsonian, and
Or at least her handwriting.
My father's slide rule is in the Smithsonian.
oh wow.
He used it to develop the acoustic homing torpedoes
Oh my.
during World War II up at the Harvard Underwater Sound Lab.
Wow.
So it's in the Smithsonian somewhere. Big slide rule.
Mhm.
There's a tape of my uncle and his recollections of, he was a medical, of going into, I forget which concentration camp. that he had
Oh
there.
my.
After World War II.
Yeah. It's those memories are so important. So
My
important.
father-in-law unfortunately lost a footlocker full of photographs. Many of them from when the camps were liberated
Oh,
because
yeah.
he was in a reconnaissance group.
Wow.
And they saw them once, only some of them.
Mhm.
And here somewhere they got
I've
lost.
seen enough of the Holocaust.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah.
But he's working, his job was a mobile photo lab.
Oh.
So he went followed, I think, the Third Army as they went across, but most of what he was developing was aerial photographs. That's really, but when he got the people on the ground taking pictures, they also developed those.
Well, God bless you, friends, and thank you very much for inviting me to come. This has just been a delight for me. You've helped me to preparing for these and responding to questions and other just comments are going to shape the book, which will come out in 2028, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise.
Before I forget, can you give me your home address? There is going to be a speaker's honorarium check written, but it didn't get through the layers of appropriate signatures in time, so it will be mailed to you.
Okay, remind me and I'll make sure.
It's not, I looked.
Oh, okay. Because you have two signers here.
We do have the check signers, but we don't have the check.
Okay.
Oh, mercy. Can we pray together? Ah, Lord Jesus, thank you for calling us together as your people. Thank you for wisdom, Abba, for wise sages still among us, for memories, photographs, recordings, voices that speak across the years. And thank you for these texts, these ancient witnesses to the wisdom of your people that preserve their voices across millennia. Ah, Lord Jesus, open our hearts and our minds to your wisdom. Help us to be inspired and empowered by your Spirit to pursue justice and wisdom in our own time. For this is our prayer in Jesus' holy name. Amen. In our first session together about a month ago, I proposed to you that when in Proverbs 9, it says that wisdom has built a house, and she invites us to come into her house as her guests, to sit and feast at her table. I suggested to you that wisdom's house is this book, the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 9 says that wisdom's house has 7 pillars, and accordingly, the book of Proverbs is divided by 7 headings into 7 parts. The first is in the very first verse of chapter 1, the Proverbs of Solomon, introducing what I proposed as the introduction to the book in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 10 also opens with those same words, the Proverbs of Solomon, Mishle Shlomo. And what follows, I would argue, is the oldest portion of the book, chapter 10:1 through 22:16. There is another heading that we can reconstruct, at least from the Greek evidence, in chapter 22, verse 17, which introduces what follows as the words of the wise, the words of the wise. And the following portion, recall, is wisdom that shows conversation with Egyptian sources in particular. The next section is a very short one, and I suggest it is probably the last, the youngest portion of the book. That's chapter 24, verses 23 through 34, which is delightfully introduced by, here are some more wise sayings.
Miscellaneous.
Yeah, a kind of appendix to the sayings of the wise which precede. And then the last two sections, well, then in chapter 25, we see again that familiar heading, the Proverbs of Solomon. But this time we're told that these are sayings that were collected during the reign of King Hezekiah, specifically. So Solomon, in the tradition, and Peter and I were talking about this a little just before class, Solomon becomes associated with wisdom in the way that Moses becomes associated with Torah, in the way that David becomes associated with song and poetry. So in the Gospels, Jesus can quote a psalm and say, David says. And whenever anything from the first 5 books of the Bible is cited, they're frequently referred to as the books of Moses or laws of Moses. Similarly here, Solomon becomes a figure associated with wise sayings. The last 2 headings and the last 2 pillars, if you will, of the 7 are the 2 that we've been considering these last Sunday and this Sunday. The sayings of Agur, son of Yake, in chapter 30. And in chapter 31, the heading which introduces this, the 7th heading, the 7th pillar, if you will, these are Divrei Limuel Melech, the words of King Melech. Now, we have no idea. I said King Melech, didn't I? Yep. King Lemuel is what I meant. We have no idea who King Lemuel was. Certainly there was no king in Israel's traditions, in Jerusalem or in Samaria in the north, who was called Lemuel. One possibility is that one of the words in this verse, in the NRSV UE, it says, the words of King Lemuel, an oracle. The word translated oracle here and in many English translations of Proverbs is Masa. Masa may be a word meaning a prophetic oracle, but Masa might also be a place name. So that Lemuel is the king of Masa. We know that Masa is mentioned in the genealogy of Ishmael, who was Abraham's oldest son. That's in Genesis 25, I believe, and also repeated in Chronicles chapter 1. Ishmael is understood as the ancestor of the Arabian peoples, and Ishmael's 7th son is Masa. So perhaps King Lemuel was king in one of the Arab tribes, and again, this represents the cosmopolitan, if you will, character of the wisdom we encounter in Proverbs, drawing from a variety of directions and sources. Very quickly, however, it becomes clear that the words that follow are not actually Lemuel's words. These are the words of King Lemuel, which his mother taught him. What we find in Proverbs 31 are the words of Lemuel's mom, which I find just delightful. This is one of a very few passages in the Hebrew Bible that are actually attributed to a woman. The two others that occur to me are two of the oldest traditions in the Hebrew Bible. The Song of Deborah in Judges 5, a very old song describing the Lord as a delivering warrior, helping Israel to triumph over the armies of Sisera. And in the oldest passage, the very oldest tradition that we find on the left-hand side of the Bible, the Song of the Sea in Exodus 15, that song, recalling Israel's deliverance from bondage in Egypt, is attributed in Exodus 15 to Miriam, Moses' sister. So I think I may have said this is the only passage ascribed to a woman, but as soon as I said it, I started thinking, no, wait a minute, Steve, let's look again. We don't know her name. She does not introduce herself by name. We know her only by her relationship to her son. The words, the wisdom of King Lemuel's mother divide very neatly into two parts. Part one is Proverbs 31 verses 1 through 9, which is a poem giving advice for how a king ought to reign. It is, in its theme at least, reminiscent of Deuteronomy 17, which also gives advice, counsel, indeed direction to the king, limiting the king's power. But there are very few parallels between the two. It seems very unlikely that there's any real relationship, although there is one intriguing parallel. I love the way this poem begins. No, my son, Lemuel's mother says. No, son of my womb. No, son of my vows. Do not give your strength to women. Your ways to those who destroy kings. Intriguingly, in Deuteronomy 17, there is also the statement that the king is not to have many wives. The king should not multiply many wives for himself. In Deuteronomy 17, that bit of direction appears to refer very specifically to what we today would call foreign policy. Solomon famously had dozens and dozens of wives, and most of those marriages were marriages made to seal a trade agreement or a treaty or an alliance with another power by putting a restriction on the number of wives that the king ought to have. Deuteronomy 17 intends to put a limit on Israel's foreign entanglements, if you will. But there's no such proviso here. King Lemuel's mother is talking very explicitly about morality. Lemuel is not to be a womanizer. The king is to be faithful. In marriage, the king is not to be involved in multiple relationships because they will corrupt the king's position and power and influence. So says King Lemuel's mother, at any rate. The verses that follow this have no parallel anywhere at all, of which I am aware. They have to do with the king not drinking, or at least not drinking too much. Lemuel's mother says, "It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, or for rulers to desire strong drink." I want you to take a look at why. Why does Lemuel's mother say that kings ought not be drunkards?
Lest they forget what has been decreed.
Yeah.
And pervert the rights of all the afflicted.
Yeah. And pervert the rights of the afflicted.
Mine says deprive all the oppressed of their rights.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like that.
It's very clear. And we'll see this especially in the last two verses of this little poem. But it's very clear that in the mind of King Lemuel's mother, it is the task of those in power to care for the powerless. And the danger of the king drinking is the king forgetting the decrees, the king not guaranteeing justice, the king failing to preserve the rights of those oppressed, those afflicted.
Would that be like also why that he should not give his strength to women? Because that's
Yeah,
potentially a abuse of power over powerless
yeah,
group of people.
yeah. Lemuel's mother has real wisdom, I think, here. The king has an obligation, a responsibility. It's interesting to note those for whom Lemuel's mother says alcohol is intended. Give strong drink to one who is perishing. Wine to those in bitter distress. Let them drink and forget their poverty and remember their misery no more. But forgetfulness is not for the king. The king is to have a clear head, to pursue justice on behalf of those who might otherwise have no justice. These last two verses, friends, verses 8 and 9, I think have no parallel, no peer anywhere in Scripture for a description of what those in power ought to do with their power and privilege. Lemuel's mother says, "Speak out for those who cannot speak, for the rights of all the destitute. Speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy." Now in Deuteronomy 17, there's nothing quite like this. What it says is that the king is to study Torah and to be an example in the king's following of the Torah. But Lemuel's mother emphasizes the particular responsibility, the obligation of those in power to care for the powerless.
Is this sort of like what Jesus talked about, the servant leader?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is also in keeping with prophetic teaching broadly in the Hebrew Bible about the responsibilities of the king, particularly in the best of Israel's legal traditions. The king is the ultimate guarantor on earth of justice for those who otherwise fall through the cracks. Three groups are consistently mentioned in the Hebrew Bible in this category, people that
It's 12
might
o'clock.
fall through the cracks otherwise. The widow, who has no husband to guarantee her access to property and to defend her. The orphan, who has no parents to protect and defend her. And the immigrant, the ger, who has no property and no guaranteed legal right, and therefore may fall through the cracks and be oppressed. The Hebrew Bible makes very plain, that it is the obligation of government, the obligation of those in power to care for the powerless. Whenever anyone says that the Bible doesn't have anything to do with social justice, know that that is a lie from the pits of hell, friends. The Bible is all about social justice.
Have you any good idea whether Lemuel's words were written before or after Micah's book? Because that was the scripture we
You're
heard
preaching
today.
the sermon I preached today.
Yeah. Well, certainly, I'm persuaded on a variety of grounds that this is pretty late. But I don't have a firm idea. I don't think there are firm clues to enable us to date it precisely. Certainly, it seems to understand a conversation with the prophets, and Micah may well be there in the background,
I would
certainly.
think Micah's significantly before this writing.
Oh yeah. So again, Lemuel's mother says to the king, which means we're talking about government. But also, as we'll see, this seems to apply to anyone in a position of power and privilege. What is it for? What is it for? Speak for those who have no voice. Lemuel's mother says, speak out for those who cannot speak. For the rights of the destitute, speak out, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. Now, I'm betting that before we came into the room this morning, you had already heard of Proverbs 31, but I'm betting that what you had heard didn't have to do with the first 9 verses, that it had to do with the marvelous poem we find at the end of the chapter, Proverbs 31, verses 10 through 31. This poem is an acrostic. Now, In English poetry, acrostics are poems. Well, how does an acrostic work?
Initial letter or initial words read vertically spell out a message.
Yeah, there's a kind of hidden message. A common assignment in junior high poetry classes is take your name, and for each letter of your name, you write a line or come up with a word, and in that way come up with a poem. In Hebrew acrostics, though, they are based on the Hebrew alphabet. Hebrew acrostics go through the 22 letters of the alphabet in sequence, and each line or each section of the poem begins with that letter. The most famous example, and probably the most familiar example in the Hebrew Bible, is Psalm 119, which consists of 22 stanzas, each 8 lines long, and each beginning with a new letter of the alphabet. So the first stanza, all 8 lines, all begin with Aleph. The second stanza, all 8 lines, all begin with Beit, and so on, right through to the end of the Hebrew alphabet. The same thing has been done here in 31:10 through 31. I don't know if it would be possible to do an English translation which preserves this notion, but the first line, the first verse, begins with Aleph, which is the first letter in the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet. The first word, the first 2 words, are Isheth Chayil. Isheth Chayil. Isheth, or Isha in Hebrew, means woman. But it also means wife. And so famously in the King James Version, the text says, a virtuous wife, who can find? She is far more precious than jewels, more precious than rubies, I think the King James has. A virtuous wife. In the Revised Standard Version, or actually the NRSV, and also in the Jewish Publication Society's translation of the Hebrew Bible, it says a capable wife. A capable wife. But again, remember that Isha doesn't just mean wife, it really means woman, fundamentally. And the next word is a fascinating one. Chayil. Chayil means power or strength. It can mean wealth, but most commonly, Chayil refers to martial power, military might. And so it's intriguing that in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, it says, Gunai ke Andream, which means a woman of courage, Although actually, as Andreon, it sounds like android and various other words. What it really means literally would be a manly woman.
Yeah.
A manly woman, a courageous woman, the Greek says. The Latin, I love this. In the Vulgate, it's mulierem fortum, which means a valiant woman. A valiant woman. I think that's my favorite. The NRSV UE has a woman of strength. A woman of strength, a strong woman. That
One says noble character.
uh,
A bit different.
yeah.
Noble character.
This one says capable.
Yeah. That same phrase, Isheth Chayil, appears earlier in Proverbs in chapter 12, verse 4. There, the Greek translators read just the same. Gweneke Andreon, a courageous woman or a manly woman. Intriguingly, the NRSV UE in chapter 12, verse 4 has a good wife, which is a real cop-out, I think. My favorite use of this expression, Isheth Chayil, is in Ruth, chapter 3, verse 11. You know the story of Ruth. Ruth and her mother-in-law Naomi are destitute, and Naomi has, they're making a living by gleaning. And Ruth has been gleaning at the field of Boaz, who it turns out is a kinsman of her mother-in-law Naomi. And she has already caught Boaz's eye. Because Boaz, we need to understand that in the Hebrew Bible, various formulations of the law state that when you harvest a field, you're not to do too good a job. You are very deliberately to leave the edges and the corners of the field unharvested, because that will provide food, first of all, for wild animals, but secondly, and most especially, it will provide food for the poorest of the poor, the destitute who can reap those edges of the field and get some sustenance. Boaz makes sure to tell his harvesters that when Ruth is gleaning, they're to do a particularly bad job. And, of course, Ruth's mother-in-law, Naomi, realizes what's going on. And she advises Ruth, here's what you do. I want you to sneak yourself into Boaz's tent and seduce him. Ruth goes into Boaz's tent. He finds her there. And he says to her, you are Isheth Chayil. You're a mighty woman. You're a woman of valor. I love what the Greek translation of the Jewish Bible does in this passage. It translates Chayil in this context as dunamis, which is where we get our word dynamite.
Yeah.
Dunamis means powerful. You're a powerful woman.
Maybe not the best time to say a manly woman.
In the Greek Bible, your Boaz says, Ruth, you're dynamite. I love this. A woman of power, a woman of virtue, a woman of strength and valor. So you are clued already to the fact that the poem which follows does not describe a mousy, submissive, quiet woman.
If you've ever visited St. Nicholas Catholic Church in Millvale, the Croatian church with those incredible murals,
Yes.
right in the apse behind the altar is Mary, Queen of Croatia, have mercy on us. That's the phrase over there. But the portrait of Mary holding the infant Jesus is not a meek, mild, wispy little woman. It's a peasant woman. Hefty arms and legs. A strong woman.
Yeah.
And that image, because I was there just a couple months ago, that image just came to my mind when you were describing this.
I love that. When we read through this poem, it doesn't, you can tell by the way that it is an acrostic, even without that information, because it doesn't really progress. It doesn't have any natural progression or theme. That's because each line has to begin with a new letter of the alphabet, and the poet does the best that the poet can. The mother of Lemuel is having fun with the form, but I want you to notice what it says about the woman of strength, the valorous woman. She has the trust of her husband. He has confidence in her, and for good reason. She is an excellent planner. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. The description of this woman's activity, friends, called to my mind what we saw earlier in Proverbs and what we saw just last week in the nature wisdom of Vagur, son of Yake, the lessons that are learned from the ant about planning and hard work and skillful application. All of this is true of this woman who is an economic powerhouse and who thereby makes her home secure so that she earns the praise not just of her children and her husband, but of her whole neighborhood. But I want you to note that what was said about the king and the government in that previous poem here also applies to her and to any who find themselves in a position of abundance. Look at verse 20. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. So the abundance that her skill and her planning and her foresight make available to her is not just for her and for hers, not just for her household, but also for those who do not have enough. What she said about the king also applies to her and to any woman of strength, of valor. Ishef Chayil. Of course, that is not the way that this chapter is typically read and applied, especially in many conservative Christian circles. The message that is gleaned from Proverbs 31:10 and following is that women ought to be wives and mothers. That is a woman's proper task. I was reading, well, I've been using for some time the Study Bible of the NRSVUE, which was put together by the Society of Biblical Literature. There are frequent blurbs, notes and comments that are helpful. And in this case, there is a little window headed A Korean Perspective. And the Korean perspective here is provided by United Methodist Bible scholar Sun Kang. Sun Kang says that in the Korean church when she was growing up, this passage was read very specifically through the lens of Confucianism. Now, there's a certain appropriateness to that. We noted last time that Agor is aware of the importance of social distinctions, or upholds the idea that people ought to find their appropriate level in life and occupy that. That certainly is the teaching of Confucius. Kang writes, a virtuous woman, this is what she grew up being told in her Korean church. A virtuous woman is one whose conduct, speech, behavior, appearance, and service are morally virtuous. She is well behaved, diligent, and obedient to her husband. Prominent Christian leaders, she says, in South Korea and also in many Korean churches in America, she notes, often preach that women are called to the domestic life. That's the lesson they derive from this chapter, that women are called to the domestic life. But Kang observes that such a message has limitations for men as well as for women. Such a perspective, such a message creates deficient ideals about men's and women's self-sufficiency. So Kang suggests that when we approach this text and others like it, we need to be aware of the way that these texts have been read and have been used. Not just what the text on the page says, but how it has been applied and ways in which that application may in fact run counter to the text itself. Kang concludes that Proverbs 31, 10 through 31 offers wisdom for women to survive and thrive. That, she suggests, is perhaps the best message to take away from this text, not some notion of where women belong and where men belong, but an affirmation of the values that make for being an ishes chayil or an ish chayil, a woman or a man of valor. I was intrigued to realize as I was reading and rereading this last chapter of Proverbs at the ways in which it refers us back to the first 9 chapters, to the introduction to Proverbs, both in the warning about loose women in the verses 2 and 3, and in the poem about the Isha Chayil, the woman of strength, the woman of valor, in 31:10 and following. A key feature of the first 9 chapters of Proverbs is the description of a contest, if you will, for our attention from 2 women. The one woman is wisdom herself, wisdom personified. The other woman is called Zara. Zar in Hebrew means strange, stranger. This is the feminine form, so a strange woman, perhaps a foreign woman. We'll see that in the NRSV UE it gets translated as a loose woman. The Jewish Publication Society translated as the forbidden woman. But just as chokmah, wisdom, is personified as a woman, so here it seems to as a woman, and they do some of the same things. If we go back to the beginning of Proverbs, in chapter 1, verse 20, in the squares, she raises her voice. At the busiest corner, she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates, she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? Give heed to my reproof. But then look at chapter 2, verse 16. Here we're told that we need to be saved from the Zara, the other woman, the loose woman, the strange woman, the adulteress with her smooth words, who also calls us to follow her. But her path leads to the shades, leads down to death. Those who go to her never come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. In chapter 5, verse 3, the lips of the Zara. Again, the NRSV has loose woman. What do your Bibles have there?
Adulterers.
Adulteress. Zara, the strange woman, the other woman. They drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil, the text says. She is also issuing an invitation, calling for us to follow her. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, verse 4. Sharp as a two-edged sword, her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol, to the underworld. In chapter 7, the sage, the writer, says, I've sat at my window and watched. And I've seen the simple ones, the youths, the young men without sense, passing along the street near her corner, taking the road to her house. So Zara, the strange woman, she has a house too. And she also is in the streets, calling, speaking. But look at chapter 8. Does not wisdom call? And understanding raise her voice on the heights beside the way at the crossroads. She takes her stand. There is a competition underway. Proverbs wants us to know. And just as King Lemuel's mother warned him about which path to follow, so the sages in Proverbs say we need to follow the way of wisdom and not the way of the world, not the Zara, not the other, the strange one. Remember that in chapter 8, and we spent our second session on this, friends, Lady Wisdom introduces herself, and in his commentary, John Goldingay calls this her memoir, Wisdom's memoir. She describes how she was present from the beginning of creation. Verse 22, the Lord created me at the beginning of his work. But as we noted then, the word that's used here in Hebrew really doesn't mean created at all. It's the word for getting engaged. It's the word for finding a wife, kana. It's the word that's used in Ruth. Another parallel with that book. Wisdom is like the woman of virtue, the strong woman in Proverbs 31, described as God's spouse, if you will. And the fundamental message of Proverbs is two ways are laid before us. We are called to make choices all the time. We must make sure to choose the path of wisdom. The path followed by the Ishef Chayil, the path that Lemuel's mother urged him to follow in his own reign. The path of justice, the path of wisdom. God bless you, friends, and thank you. I think I have taken all my time. God bless you. But again, as I've said before, I will stick around and answer any questions that you may have. But if you need to go, go. Thank you and God bless you.
Also, Pastor Lindsay, could you just say a few words to this group about what's coming up in this room next week?
Yeah, next week and the week after, we're gonna do a very quick study before Lent on the Declaration of Farman. That was requested by Bob to look into that with our most recent events. And so I'll lead that the next 2 weeks for Faith Works. So. Do you want any other detail? Because I don't have any yet.
Just the clarification that Barman was a religious community or a town in Germany, and it was a place where Christian theologians and non-clergy met to come up with what should be a Christian response to a government that attacked people within its community who were not like the ones the rulers wanted to see, a government that shot people for protesting, a government that oppressed the poor and the powerless, and that would have been very much at home in Minneapolis this past week.
And that proclaimed it in the name of Christ.
Yeah.
I think that is a key feature in both Nazi Germany and Christian nationalism in America today.
Yeah. We should note that there was indeed an official state church in Germany that, in fact, you can still find churches. I don't know if they've preserved this, but there were swastikas, incorporated iron crosses, incorporated into Christian architecture. One church had an engraving on its pulpit of Jesus teaching the crowd, and in the crowd there is a stormtrooper listening. The state church in Germany propounded the idea of a heroic Jesus, a strong warrior Jesus, who was certainly not Jewish.
Was he blonde?
John Wayne and Jesus.
And
Yeah, it is very much like that book, yeah.
very important. So we've been here before. We've been here before, and that is scary, but it's also exciting to know that there is another side to this struggle. God bless you guys.
And thank you very much.
Thank you all for having me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Lord bless you. Yeah. 408 Dogwood Court.
I went back to my nuts
Gibson.
Socks and hats.
15044.
15044. I'll make sure that gets conveyed and nailed.
Alrighty.
NRSVUE.
And thank you for doing that
Revised
annual
Standard Version.
report, Bob.
Oh, yeah, I think I may have left
Updated
things out,
edition.
but
That's okay.
is that okay?
Published in
It
21.
doesn't need to be a
No,
perfect
was
no,
a,
annal of
yeah.
everything.
cooperative project
All right.
of the Society of Biblical Literature and the National Council of Churches. The idea was that they thought it was time to update the NRSV, to take a new look at the texts. They wound up making about 14,000 substantive changes. Some of them are, and this intrigues me, one of the particular interests this time around, when the NRSV was done, a particular interest was, can we find ways to be more inclusive of women, to recognize places where older translations have said men, but the text doesn't. But also, in the NRSV, the typical Christian greeting, adelphoi, brothers, is made brothers and sisters. That's not technically what the Greek says, but it is reflective of the fact that there were women in those early churches and women leaders. In the NRSV, they were particularly sensitive to ableist readings that reduce a person to their infirmity. So instead of calling a person a leper, they say, a man with a skin disease
Right.
came to Jesus. And that kind of change is made across the board. Some of the changes I like very much. I'm in the process of writing an article about another change I don't like so much. I wish that they had left the NRSV in print because I really like many of the text critical decisions that were made there. They decided to let that lapse. The RSV is still in print, but the NRSV is not. And I really liked some of the text critical readings in the NRSV they've preserved, but some they've shifted on, and in some of those places I'm not so sure they made the right choice. But by and large, I'm using
The
it.
improvements outnumber
Yeah.
the deficits.
Oh,
in your
yeah.
opinion. Okay.
And with any translation, there are going to be those kinds of questions and struggles. So, but yeah, it's NRSV UE, the updated edition of the NRSV.
Okay.
But Lord bless you. Take care, Peter. Oh, there it is.
That's my photo.
Oh,
The centerpiece above
Yeah.
the altar.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And the murals painted by Maxo Vanka.
Yes.
The second set were greatly affected by his experiences in the World War. Come on, let's go away. Mary on the battlefield. That's just a detail of it.
Holding.
And it's paired with, on the other side, Christ on the battlefield.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.